Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Stephen King Cast, one man's musings on the works of Stephen King. Each week, I will review one entry in the bibliography of Stephen King and the chronological order of publication. This week, I will be reviewing 1989's film adaptation of Stephen King's 1983 novel, Pet Sematary, directed by Mary Lambert, starring Dale Midkiff.
So this is a movie that it's not like I just watched the film adaptation of Christine last week, and I hadn't seen Christine since I first saw it when I was like 13 years old. Pet Sematary, however, is a movie that I've seen countless times. I remember seeing it, must have been not that much later when it came out in the theaters, probably when it first hit VHS. I saw it, and I've seen it just over and over and over again. So it really wasn't. The experience of watching it to me was just watching a movie that I'm very familiar with, and it's certainly a movie that has its hold in the world of horror movies. Fred Gwynne's portrayal of Judd is legendary, and some of his lines are just classic horror movie lines. Of course, you know the ones that I'm talking about, the most famous being that sometimes dead is better. And there are some issues that I have with the movie, and I don't think that it ever could be, it's not ever as good as it could be, but there's certainly some effective scenes throughout. The acting is all over the place. Just choose an actor, compare it against the other actor in the movie. Some of the actors are going to be a lot better, a lot worse than some of their counterparts. And I know that there's been talks of remaking it, which, when I first heard it, I thought it was unnecessary. But you know what? I'd like to see what someone else can do with Pet Sematary, especially in this day and age. Our filmmaking sensibilities have changed somewhat. I think that some of just the shots and blocking of this particular movie is, I don't know, not inventive. There are some inventive shots, but a lot of it is sometimes some of the impact is lessened, and I would like to see what we could do with a movie today. So I'm just gonna jump right into it. And away we go. So, right away, I think it's a very effective opening. The sounds of nature emerge from a black screen before revealing the Pet Sematary itself. It's run down, it's overgrown. We hear the ghostly echoes of the children's goodbye to their pets. Devoid of any emotion, the effect falls flat, and I wish that Mary Lambert, the director, had left it out. So, this is an example of what I would like to see done differently if there was a remake. I don't think that we need the children's voices reading their final goodbyes to their pets. The music alone works, and it's reminiscent of other horror movies. I want to say Amityville Horror, but I'm not sure. But it definitely is making me think of at least one other horror movie, and there's definitely not shout-outs, but I don't even know if they're homages. I don't know if they are meant to be tributes, but there are touches of other horror movies within this movie that I'll get to later. So the grave markers are put together by scrap and leftover wood. The camera closes in on a number of the grave sites and epitaphs to really hammer home where we are and what this is. In the novel, we aren't introduced to the Pet Sematary until later in the narrative, but by placing it in the beginning, it helps set the tone of what will come. By introducing us with the place of death, a children's place of death, it creates a dark and foreboding undertone, especially when we meet the Creeds and their young children. Viewers just don't want to associate children with death, and the introduction to the Pet Sematary does just that. The camera pans under the opening of the cemetery to the stack of wood that serves as the barrier to the Micmac burial ground. A second later, we hear a loud roaring that we immediately assume is an animal before the camera cuts to a truck rolling down the road. It's a good choice, making the connection between this place and the truck speeding down the road. As for the barrier itself in the book, I pictured it to be a wall, a giant wall of wood, just made of of just trees that were put together to block the entrance to the Micmac burial ground. But here it just looks like discarded underbrush. I mean, to me, in my mind's eye, in the book, it was intimidating. Here, it just looks like someone needs to do some cleanup. And we meet the Creeds as they move into their new idyllic house. And for me, it's way too precious. You know, the music swells with Rachel's pronouncement of the house being gorgeous. And I'm not sure if it's just this was of the time, I don't recall, or if it's just a little bit too much, a little bit too on the nose, a little bit too earnest when it doesn't have to be. And this is another reason why I would like to see what someone else could do in 2014. But look, with that said, I have to give a lot of credit to the cinematographer here, because the colors just pop. You know, the grass is so green, the sky is so blue, the clouds are so white. It's at times a gorgeous movie to look at other times it's a horrific movie to look at for all of the right reasons. Look, when we're introduced to Gage, and Gage's end is teased much, much earlier as he starts to wander off into the road. And he's rescued by Herman Munster himself, Judd Crandall. It's a good choice to introduce Judd this way, because in the movie, Stephen King can't tell us about the dangers of the road. As an audiovisual medium, Mary Lambert has to show us. Juxtaposing little Gage against the giant speeding trucks reinforce the danger of the road and how fragile Gage really is. Judd's rescue of Gage introduces him as an active and heroic character, which may be one of the reasons why Fred Gwynn's performance is so beloved. You know, I like I said, I can understand if they would want to do a remake. But with that said, Gwynn's northeastern drawl is synonymous with the movie, and holds the distinction of having given one of horror's most iconic lines that, like I said earlier, sometimes dead is better. So whoever follows in his footsteps has pretty mighty big shoes to fill. So I was kind of getting a bad feeling for a little bit, because if you've listened to my Firestarter movie review, I couldn't handle the amounts of exposition and just proclamations of how people were feeling in a given moment, and we were starting to get that a little bit in the beginning. But you know, I took some notes on it, and thankfully it died out in of itself. It's just Stephen King, who, by the way, wrote this screenplay, and it's the first screenplay that he wrote from one of his works. In fact, by this point, it's 1989. He's got a lot of clout, and he used his clout while making this movie, making sure that the script was pretty much adhered to. He wanted it filmed in certain locations, so he definitely isn't some pushover writer. He's a force to be reckoned with. And by saying that, I don't mean that he was some blowhard making demands. He just, he can make requests. He can do these things because at this point he is Stephen King. So right away, when introducing Judd, Judd starts teasing the origins of the path, right? And as if we didn't get enough sense that something's wrong with the path, the creepy music starts playing. And as soon as Lewis walks the edge of the path, we get cat scare number 1. It will not be the last. And cat scares, just cats jumping out of nowhere to scare the main character, and thusly the audience is by this point it is a ridiculed and satired effect, but it is on display and it is genuine in this movie. I don't think it's necessarily effective. I can't help but view it through a 2014 perspective, and so it doesn't really affect me. But it's the first of many cat scares. The truck reminds us of the danger, and Lewis crosses the road to get to know his neighbor. Fred Gwynn chews the scenery while filling us on the origin of the path and why Lewis should get church fixed. And by this point, like I said, I was starting to worry that the dialogue was going to start to wander into Firestarter territory, Firestarter the movie. Literally, the dialogue at one point was, "My daughter has a cat. His name is Winston Churchill. We call him Church for short." That got me worried. It got me really, really worried. And then we meet Missy, someone who was even more small town Maine than Judd himself. Good Time Missy, the original Debbie Downer. She takes the place of Mrs. Crandall as a sickly, stubborn Mainer. So, I mean, she ultimately takes her life, which provides Ellie's first confrontation with death. The suicide gives the story the darker turn it needs, and it cuts out the scenes with Norma Crandall, which don't add up much to the story itself. I think the inclusion of Norma would have made Judd maybe a little bit less creepy and manic, as he's played all wild-eyed and portentous by Fred Gwynne. In the novel, Judd isn't nearly as animated, and if Norma had been in the movie, I think she would have helped alleviate that. That said, I understand the choice to remove her character. In the context, it isn't the character that's important, but the character's function in the story itself. The death of the character was what mattered to the overall story, and here it's the death of Missy. Different character, different death, but same effect. Plus, in the movie, we get a Stephen King cameo as the minister. And we learn that Rachel isn't at the funeral because, her fear of death. So this first manifests itself, this fear of death, even before the funeral scene. It manifests itself at the Pet Sematary when Rachel doesn't go after Judd, but she definitely lets it known her feelings on being there and discussing death around the children. But it's important. It's important that happens because that's the conflict when it comes to Rachel. There's the fear of death on one side and the understanding of it, as embodied by Judd in this case, on the other. And then we get Ellie. Okay. Look, nothing against the actress. She's just a kid, but Jesus, the acting is not good. It's not good acting. And it's hard. It's hard to sit through as she makes her. I can't call it acting. Or she just what she does. It's just, for me, it's a little hard to watch. At breakfast with Ellie dressed like Edna Mode from The Incredibles, we realize that there's some underlying tension between her parents, which comes out when Rachel forces Lewis to make a promise that he has no control over. Then we cut to Lewis's first day of school with an immediate cut to Victor Pascow, who pops back alive when he gets his chance alone with Lewis to deliver one of the movie's catchphrases, which I guess might work in the book, but it just seems so forced in the movie, and that's the soil of a man's heart is stonier. It's forced. I mean, to me, everything about his death is forced, from the overacting of Victor to the distorted voice that they use for him. And then when he shows up in the next scene in the bedroom, he appears way, way less otherworldly and more just he's like a ghost, right? I mean, he not only is he acting like a ghost rather than like a force. Honestly, he just appears to be doing an impersonation of Jack from An American Werewolf in London, right? Just an animated, mutilated corpse acting more appropriately if he was going out for a night on the town than back in the grave. So with that said, it's still a creepy scene, I think that's an effective scene while they're still in the house, because I think it's the deep silence in between Victor's dialogue. He'll say something and then nothing is said, and it's just the emptiness just fills up the spaces. It's very effective as the mist fills in the space between the stones lining the path itself as they walk, at night. And there's just something about mist in horror movies. They just go together like milk and cookies, and I'll never get enough mist in my horror movies. And it is on display here in Pet Sematary. There isn't a scene of the path at night where it isn't just drenched in mist.
It's fun to introduce kids to the things we love, like punk rock. But one thing we shouldn't introduce them to is lottery tickets, because they can put kids at risk of developing a gambling problem in the future. So introduce them to music, not lottery tickets.
Go ahead, sweetie, try the E chord. Let's keep practicing.
Learn more at mass.gov/youthgambling. A message from the Massachusetts Department of Public Health.
And the Pet Sematary itself at night is just completely carpeted with mist. Maybe it's a cliche, I don't know, but I'm very, very pleased with the set dressing in this movie. It really creates for an effective setting. Now, I haven't mentioned it yet. We're almost about 15 minutes into the review so far, but I guess we gotta talk about Dale Midkiff a little bit. The guy, he just doesn't emote. Every single line is spoken with the same monotone delivery. And I guess it doesn't help that he shares most of his screen time with Fred Gwynne, who plays the role so over the top, I'm never sure if he thinks that he's in a comedy or a horror movie. Regardless of whatever you think of Gwynne's performance, whether you think it's just too much or just right, it's memorable, right? I think that we can all agree on that, and I think that his performance gives the movie all of its charm. Whereas Midkiff, I really don't know what he contributes. Last week, I made the statement that Lewis wasn't much of a character, the book Lewis. Now, in hindsight, I don't know if that was very fair to the character that Stephen King wrote. I think that the repeated viewings of the movie over the years shaped my perception of the book, which is to say, my memory of Dale Midkiff's performance. Except, seriously, big except here. His acting with the kids is incredible. Maybe he just couldn't pull off some of the more ham-fisted bits of dialogue that was required in his scenes with Fred Gwynne. But I think that his scenes with the kids are genuine with emotion. I feel in those moments everything I need to feel in order for the movie to work. The overpowering love of a father towards his children. He, from the way he just smiles at them, or the way he says "uh-oh," with Gage when he's playing. There's a genuineness to it that I think really, really works in the movie's favor. Soon after, we get cat scare number 2, except this time it's Zombie Church, who has just been reanimated from the Micmac burial ground. Now, Resurrected Church is not as slow going as he was in the book. Now, in the book, the resurrected dead were less. Okay, there was something really wrong about them. Now, one of the things that they can do in the book is really demonstrate a sense of smell within the characters. You can't do that in a movie, not unless you have smell-o-vision in your home entertainment system. So you can't really get the sense of decay that's there. I mean, you can have people say yuck and kind of be disgusted at, but the overpowering stench is not something that can necessarily be conveyed in the movie. But here, we have a church that is slightly evil. He's aggressive with bright yellow eyes, and when he scratches Lewis when he first comes back, we get the sense of danger. And immediately we equate that the Micmac burial ground equals danger. Later we're going to see Church's disturbing new nature as he drops a dead rat into Lewis's bathtub. Now, the vulnerability in this scene is what makes it work. The point is here, the resurrected are more dangerous and more outwardly awful than they are in the book. Judd tells the tale of Timmy Baterman, and like Church, the representation of Timmy Baterman is much, much more deranged. This ghoul is less possessed, as he is in the book, and just more insane and clearly dead. Our first shot of Timmy is him holding a body part and gouging his face. He then approaches a local woman, who is now the second woman we see hanging laundry, by the way. And with what we've seen of Missy carting off the laundry, Pet Sematary has a strong opinion of what women are good for. This propels Lewis to get the 411 from Judd, who narrates a god-awful flashback with lines like, "Judd, come and get your dog. He stinks of the ground you buried him in." And the actor playing young Judd could just as easily win a Halloween award for his Simple Jack costume. If you have not seen Tropic Thunder, please go out and watch it right now, and then go back to Pet Sematary and watch the flashback of young Judd and tell me that is not Simple Jack. Okay, so it's around this time, or it's actually before, that we first see Zelda. And we need to talk about Zelda a little bit, because it wouldn't be a Pet Sematary movie review if we didn't talk about Zelda. Now, for those of you who don't know, if you haven't read the book or seen the movie and you're just listening to the podcast, I would strongly recommend that you either read the book and then watch the movie, or at least just watch the movie. But Zelda is Rachel's dead sister, and so we get flashbacks to when Rachel was a child having to care for her sister who was suffering from spinal meningitis. I remember the Zelda scenes to be terrifying. The image of Zelda horrified me as a kid, and I remember not having an issue with it during subsequent rewatches. But this time I could not handle the Zelda flashback. And it's not so much the flashback or the actor playing Zelda. It was just, again, with Judd's flashback to when Timmy Baterman died. Here we have the flashback to Rachel's youth, and both include this voiceover narration. And I don't know if it's the delivery or if it's the dialogue written for Denise Crosby, but it is pretty tough to watch, and for all of the wrong reasons. But one thing that never caught my eye, that I don't understand how I saw this movie as many times as I did and never catch this and never heard it talked about, or maybe I just never paid attention to it being talked about, but that is to me, it's the scariest thing in the movie. It's not the Zelda makeup or anything having to do with the Pet Sematary. It's this painting on the wall during the flashback. Did anybody else, I don't know. I mean, it's not as if it's some subtle thing. It is presented a couple times in the movie, and at the end of the movie, Gage is dressed up like the person in the painting, and it's just an old woman in a dress wearing a top hat, and it is terrifying. I guess it's supposed to be Zelda. I didn't get that from the painting itself, but just the how out of place, and just I don't know, it just, who would put that on their wall? And what does that say about a person? It's questions like that wind up disturbing me. So whoever decision it was to include that picture, bravo, good job. I think that's great, because that, more than anything else, is what I took away from this movie during this watch. That one really got to me. After the Zelda scene is when it happens. After the Zelda flashback scene. And it is... The scene that I'm talking about is probably the hardest scene to watch from any King movie. And that goes up there with just movies in general. It's a hard scene to watch. And I'm talking about Gage's death here. The picnic is just so perfect. Gage is just so cute. How could you not fall in love every time with the kid? Every time he says, uh-oh. So anyway, as you know, or maybe as you don't know, I don't know, but the kite goes sailing off, and
running a business is hard enough. So why make it harder with a dozen different apps that don't talk to each other? One for sales, another for inventory, a separate one for accounting. Before you know it, you're drowning in software instead of growing your business. This is where Odoo comes in. Odoo is the only business software you'll ever need. It's an all-in-one, fully integrated platform that handles everything. CRM, accounting, inventory, e-commerce, HR, and more. No more app overload. No more juggling logins. Just one seamless system that makes work easier. And the best part, Odoo replaces multiple expensive platforms for a fraction of the cost. It's built to grow with your business, whether you are just starting out or already scaling up. Plus, it's easy to use, customizable, and designed to streamline every process, so you can focus on what really matters, running your business. Thousands of businesses have made the switch, so why not you? Try Odoo for free at odoo.com. That's ODOO.com.
Gage goes chasing after the kite, and Lewis gives a valiant effort. He gives everything to save his son. And I gotta say that Lewis's chase after Gage, even though it's hard to watch, Dale Midkiff, he really gives Tom Cruise a run for his money when it comes to sprint acting. And I'm not joking. Tom Cruise is known for his acting ability while running and how convincing his running is and how he gives everything to it, but the look on Dale Midkiff's face as he's running after Gage, like you feel it. You get the emotion that he has to get to Gage. The look of terror and desperation in his body as he's running is very, very palpable. Now, there are so many different ways that Lambert could have shot this scene when Gage dies. You know, I mean, the worst possibility is that we get some explicit, gruesome scene showing Gage get hit by the car. You know, but thankfully we don't get that. You know, instead, we get a very inventive and very powerful shock-induced montage of Polaroids flashing against the horrific moment of Lewis just screaming no into the air. And I just gotta say that when I think of Pet Sematary, that is the first thing that I think of. I think of just the flashes of the vacations and young Gage and just Lewis screaming. It's so much more powerful than showing the gruesome graphic results of the accident, which maybe, you know, a lesser director might have chosen to focus on. We see the tiny shoe and the massive rig overturned, and it's enough to tell us what happened. We don't need to see anything graphic here. They know enough, Stephen King writing the screenplay and Miranda Lambert directing it, know that our imaginations are enough. And not even our imaginations. We don't want to imagine it. We know what happened. And having spent time with Gage as it is, it's enough. It's enough. It's pretty brutal. But I with that said, I have to say that something struck me in the next scene which just felt off to me. Now, the next scene takes place that same night, immediately after the accident, and if it wasn't for Lewis wearing the exact same blood-stained shirt, I might think that it's at least a day or two later, but it's that night, and it just doesn't feel authentic to me. I mean, you could say that Lewis is in shock, and maybe he is, but he's so devoid of emotion that to me it's hard to imagine that the accident had occurred on that day. Now, at the funeral, while Rachel's father is berating him, Lewis just stands there crying. And that works, okay? That I buy. Because there's something so awful in that moment, you know, and that scene, it just happens so quickly, and it's almost like a dream scene, because it just, the funeral, just, it's all of a sudden we're at the funeral, and I get the sense of how overwhelming the whole experience is. So Lewis, just to be standing there realizing that his father-in-law, a man that he hates, is blaming him for the death of the child, and even before it's a punch in the face, it's a symbolic, you know, punch in the face. It's an emotional punch in the face, and he's just crying as he stands there. That to me, that I buy. But the scene at the kitchen is just missing something. And if you just gave the guy red-rimmed eyes, I'd buy it. You know, he can still look blank, and this sounds horrible, but I want to see the brutal grief on his face, because I think that we need to understand the levels of despair that he's going through in order for him to make the decision that he's going to make. Because I think that there's nothing there. I mean, shock is one thing, but this is something else. See, by this point in the book, Lewis had taken his first full steps into the land of madness. In the book, we watch him deteriorate. You know, I mean, we're fortunate enough to share his thoughts in the book, but in the movie, we get none of this. You know, there's a little bit of King humor in there, you know, that lasts about a second. You know, and the humor comes when Lewis is digging up Gage and says, "Busting you out, son," right? But I don't get the sense that he's venturing into insanity at all. It's just he's grieving, I guess, if you want to call it grief. But I don't, like I said before, Dale Midkiff in the movie, he doesn't really emote much. And he's required to speak a lot to the camera, which doesn't really work. Because it gives us his inner motivations, but it tells us his motivations. It doesn't show us his motivations. You know, he speaks the things that he's thinking, but I'd rather experience what he's feeling. I guess that ultimately this is a movie that I am going to come down a little bit harder on than I wanted to, because I feel as though the source material is rich. Because having just reread the book, I realized just what a deep and powerful examination of death that it is. Whereas this movie, I believe that it isn't ever quite sure whether it wants itself to be serious or B-movie kind of schlocky. And I think that this identity crisis does not work in its favor. So when clearly him at the graveyard, both in the book and the movie, it is so EC Comics. The moon is shining down. It's just, anytime you're at a graveyard, it has that quality of an EC Comics horror comic. And especially in the book, with just how horrific that scene's depicted. But when he does bust Gage out, I think that the movie softens what's really going on there, and I don't blame them for doing that. In the book, King gets gruesome with the description of Gage, and I can't see the movie doing what King did in the book without it coming across as exploitative or, something out of a Grindhouse movie, because Gage is messed up, and I'm glad that we don't see that. But at the same time, there are some problems with... I guess Gage, the only thing about the resurrection of Gage is that he has a scar across his forehead. Now, I'm not saying that I want him to look mangled, but I think that we need to see him look a little bit more inhuman than just having a scar across his forehead. But anyway, before he's resurrected, Lewis brings Gage to Micmac burial ground. Just at the same time when Rachel is determined to get home. Now, what I like about this, and in the book as well, that despite her fear of death, in the face of it, she overcomes it in order to save the living. Whereas Lewis, who had seemed like the one more equipped to process it, is totally undone by it. So I like that reversal that's there. After the burial, we get cat scare number 3. Just in case that we are keeping score, and I am. And then Gage returns, all right? And he is the cutest little zombie monster ever depicted on screen. I know that he's supposed to be scary, but honestly, he's just so damn cute. He's making these little roaring noises, and then when he attacks Judd, the scene ends with him bending down to bite Judd's neck, and I guess it's supposed to be horrifying, but he just looks like he's playing. It's so cute. And it's nothing against the actor, but he just, I think that he was like 2 years old at that point. He just can't help but be this adorable little toddler. He's so cute. And then, so watching it, I was like, oh, I get it. Gage is dressed exactly like that horrifying painting. When Rachel shows up, he's wearing the top hat. He looks like he's wearing that little blue dress. Never caught it. Never put the painting together with what Gage is wearing at the end. So even though the painting scared me, Gage dressed as the painting did not scare me. I guess he's supposed to be creepy, but again, I just don't think he can help it. To be cute as a button. He's holding that little scalpel, and he's like just growling, and when Lewis confronts Gage in Judd's house, the house for no reason is depicted being covered in slime and mold, and to me, this is an example of 1980s excess. It turns out to be Lewis's imagination, but to me, it's rather unnecessary. Also unnecessary, but totally awesome, is Gage's Superfly Jimmy Snuka impersonation from the attic. It is great, just watching this little dude drop like that. And it's immediately followed by a fight scene that has shades of a Saturday Night Live skit as Lewis just wrestles with a clearly like a dummy. And it ends, again, with, just the kid being cute. He's jabbed in the neck with a neck full of poison, and then just proceeds to just stagger around looking all, drunk. It's just super cute, and even when he's dying for the second time, he's just adorable, saying no fair, and he's just giving nasty looks to his dad, and he just, hey, just it just, I know it's supposed to be scary, but it's really not. And I love watching that scene because it's inadvertently funny. And then going back to what I was talking about with EC Comics, the ending is so EC Comics with the resurrection of Rachel and how horrible she looks. It's so gross. And they kiss and there's like just slime and everything pouring out of her face. It's just, the ending is great, and then immediate smash cut to the Ramones playing Pet Sematary. So again, I just don't think that the movie knows what it wants to be, because the subject matter is pretty horrible, with the death of a child and the death of a family and a descent into insanity. I mean, that's some pretty heavy themes. But the movie just touches upon them, I think, on a surface level, and gives us the flashy version without really mining its core. Or handling the subject matter delicately. But, I don't know. So I guess we're over half an hour now. Before I give my book versus movie comparison, I want to say that I like this movie. I like it. I enjoy it. This isn't the first time I've seen it. I doubt it will be the last time I see it. I'm sure that I'll catch it on television next year around Halloween, and it'll be a good background movie at this point for me. With that said, I really am a supporter if anyone does want to remake this movie. I don't remember off the top of my head who was attached. If someone was announced, I don't quite remember, but But I'm curious. I'm curious to see, like I said, what they could do, if they would make any changes, if they would keep it the same. But yeah, I'm definitely interested in that. It has the brand recognition. I think that would make some money. I think that it would be just a good revisitation to a familiar Stephen King work, filtered through a 2014 lens. I think that it would be effective. Okay. So, book versus movie. Gauge. Book versus movie. Who is better? I'm going to go with movie Gauge, because this kid is just so damn cute. The thing is with book Gauge, when Gauge is resurrected, he's a possessed monster. He is possessed by the force in the Micmac burial ground, whether it's the Wendigo or something else. Like, he speaks, and he tells us basically that he is possessed by an intelligence greater than the 2-year-old toddler that he was. That this is not just reanimated flesh, that it's something else inhabiting the body. So it makes for a very different type of resurrection, whereas this just seems like an evil version of Gauge in the movie. But I'm glad that the actor did not have to attempt the dialogue that would have come out of the novel's version of Gauge, or I'm glad that they chose not to have a voice actor speak the lines of dialogue that came out of the novel Gage's mouth. I'm glad that they just stuck with what they did, because I think that it works for the movie, and I think that this kid makes Gage memorable because of just how damn cute he is. Ellie, book versus movie. Book, because at least in the book, I can picture the kid actually saying these things, whereas I don't buy a single thing that movie Ellie is trying to sell me. Rachel, I'm going to go with, I don't know. I guess I'm going to give it a tie, because I think that Denise Crosby does a good job with the role. And the movie Rachel doesn't have the amount of scenes that book Rachel does, or not as much time is spent with her fear of death. We get the Zelda explanation, but I think that both representations are very similar. I'm going to go with both. Zelda, I'm going to go with the movie, because the movie version of Zelda is iconic and horrifying. And just the way he kind of scuttles around and cackles like a witch is very, very effective. So I don't know if I had seen the movie before reading the book. I'm not sure. I don't remember. So I don't remember ever having an image of Zelda other than the movie. But that's the image that sticks with me. Even rereading it now, this was the image. The movie image was the image that I conjured of Zelda. Then we have Judd. I'm going to go with the book. Fred Gwynn is memorable, certainly. But I believe that the book version of Judd is, like I said, he's less animated, less wild-eyed. Fred Gwynn's good, but I happen to prefer the more subtle version of Judd that appears in the book. Which brings us to Lewis. And I'm going to go, I mean, it's not even close, but it's the book. Because I need to redeem what I said about Lewis from last week. I take it back. He is a much stronger character in the book. He's a man of his convictions. He's a man of order. He doesn't have the greatest, flashiest personality, but he at least emotes. And Dale Midkiff just doesn't emote. The emotion level is the same throughout the course of the entire movie, pretty much, except when he's acting with the kids. So, I don't know. Dale Midkiff is serviceable, and he does a good job, but it's not great. And I think that if another actor had been in that role, what that other actor could have done with the just varying emotions that he could have shown throughout the entire movie at the different stages of life that he's living. When he first arrives at the house with his family and everything's perfect, we could see him calm under pressure when Pascal dies, to the disbelief of Pascal's return, to the not knowing how to handle the fact that the cat is back from the dead, to the initial shock of his son being dead, to the slow justification of what he's about to do. Like, there's a lot that could be done, and I would like to see the different flavors that an actor could bring to a role. But I don't think that Dale Midkiff did it. I think that he kind of gave us the same line delivery the entire way through. So ultimately, I'm going to go with the book. If you listened to my review last week, you know that I was very, very, impressed with what Stephen King was doing, and I still am very, very impressed. And like I said, I think it's a watchable movie. I think it's effective at times, but I think that it's lacking a certain seriousness, not seriousness, but a depth to it that I think is there that could have been explored a little bit more. So I'm all for a remake, but it is a movie worth checking out, and I'm sure that anyone listening to this has definitely seen it time and time again. So that's all I got for this week, guys. And next week, make sure that you head on back as I review The Cycle of the Werewolf. So if you have any thoughts on Pet Sematary, the book or the movie, or anything else, feel free to write in at stephenkingcast@yahoo.com. You can follow along at Twitter or Instagram, Tumblr. You can like us. I always say us. I mean, unless you're counting my dogs, there's really no us in this equation.
So you can follow me on Facebook and Blue Sky, TikTok, and Instagram. And if you have any time on your hands, leaving a review on Apple Podcasts would greatly help out. And you can always write into the stephenkingcast@yahoo.com to give me your thoughts on all things related to Stephen King. All right, everyone, I hope that you enjoyed this review of Pet Sematary, the movie, and may you have long days and pleasant nights. And I will see you here next week where MOON spells Stephen King Cast.